I forgot my card again. My daughter laughed, pushing her luxury bill and her mother-in-law's toward me. I smiled and said, "How funny, I forgot mine too." Her smile froze instantly. The color drained from Sarah's face as the cashier paused, holding a designer silk scarf halfway to the shopping bag. Next to my daughter stood Brenda, her mother-in-law, who had spent the last hour treating the high-end boutique like her personal closet. 3 bottles of imported perfume, 2 leather purses, and a pair of shoes I wouldn't even wear to garden in. "What do you mean, Mom?" Sarah whispered, dropping the playful tone. "You always carry your black card." "Not today," I replied smoothly, adjusting the strap of my practical handbag. For the past year, Sarah had orchestrated these little bonding days. She would invite me out, insist on bringing Brenda along to build family ties, and mysteriously misplace her wallet right when the cashier announced the total. I used to swipe my card just to avoid causing a scene and to maintain peace with my only daughter. But today, staring at a digital display flashing a ridiculous total for items I hadn't chosen, the dynamic was permanently changing. I looked at Brenda, whose smug expression had vanished. "Since your wallet is in the car, Brenda, you can easily go grab it. I have a book club meeting in an hour and really must get going." I didn't drive today," Brenda stammered, looking at Sarah for rescue. "Well, you two better figure it out." I nodded politely at the cashier. "Enjoy your shopping." I turned around and walked out the glass doors without waiting for a response. The spring air felt remarkably fresh. I knew the storm was coming, but for the first time, I was the one controlling the weather. Stepping into my car, I felt a deep sense of clarity. The free ride was over, but this was only the beginning of my audit. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had buzzed 14 times. They were furious text messages from Sarah and 2 missed calls from her husband, David. I ignored all of them. Instead, I walked into my quiet kitchen, brewed a strong cup of black tea, and opened my laptop. I knew exactly what had happened at that counter. Without my card, Sarah and Brenda had to face the quiet humiliation of telling the cashier to put everything back. But the boutique was just a symptom of a much larger disease. I pulled up my bank statements from the last 12 months. I had always been comfortable thanks to the careful planning my late husband and I did, but my generosity had clearly bred entitlement. Beyond the dinners and shopping trips, I noticed recurring leaks. Years ago, I had given Sarah a credit card for absolute emergencies. Looking at the recent transactions, her definition of an emergency included a premium wine subscription and monthly dues for an exclusive country club that Brenda frequented. With 3 clicks on my bank's portal, I permanently canceled the card. I didn't stop there. I scrolled down to my family cell phone plan. Sarah, David, and Brenda were all on my unlimited data plan. I navigated to the carrier's website and clicked Remove Member 3 times. They would get an automated text message letting them know their lines would be disconnected at the end of the billing cycle. My phone rang again. It was Sarah. This time, I answered. "Mom, do you have any idea how embarrassed we were?" she demanded. "Brenda is furious, I'm sure she is." I took a sip of my tea. "I need you to transfer the money to my account right now so I can go back and buy those things she ordered." "No," I replied, and cut up the emergency card. "It's deactivated." Before she could scream, I hung up. The fallout was coming, but I had one more leak to plug. The next morning, I woke up early, enjoyed my coffee on the porch, and watched the neighborhood wake up. My peace was briefly interrupted by a notification on my tablet. It was an email from my auto insurance provider. Sarah and David's 2 luxury SUVs were still on my policy. I picked up the phone and called my broker. Within 5 minutes, both vehicles were removed from my coverage. A standard automated notice would hit their inboxes, giving them exactly 30 days to secure their own insurance. Doing this wasn't an act of revenge. It was simply handing them back the responsibilities that belonged to two able-bodied adults in their 30s. At noon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly visit. Sarah marched in the second I opened the door. Her face was flushed and David trailed closely behind her, looking down at his shoes. "How could you do this?" Sarah demanded, completely bypassing a greeting. "My card was declined at the gas station this morning. What is going on?" "There's no mistake." I gestured toward the living room chairs, though she preferred to stand aggressively in the foyer. I canceled it. "You'll also be getting an email about your car insurance and cell phone plans. It's time you manage your own expenses." Sarah stared at me, her mouth slightly open. "All of this because of yesterday. You had the money, Mom. You made me look like a fool in front of the employees and Brenda. If you had the money to shop at a luxury boutique, you aren't entirely helpless," I observed calmly. "The problem isn't the card, Sarah. The problem is that you treat me like a financial sponsor instead of a mother." David finally cleared his throat, running a hand through his hair. "Anita, we rely on that card for our lifestyle. Brenda's country club membership is tied to it." I raised an eyebrow at my son-in-law. "Then Brenda can pay for her own golf." But Sarah wasn't done. She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a manila folder, signaling a much deeper invasion. Sarah slammed the folder onto my coffee table. Her expression of pure rage quickly shifted into a manufactured look of deep concern. "You're making rash decisions, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "David and I have been talking. With inflation and the cost of maintaining this big house, it's just not practical for you to live here alone anymore." David nodded firmly. "We want to help. We were thinking Brenda could move into the guest wing here. It would save her money and she could keep an eye on you. Eventually, Sarah and I would move into the master suite and you could take the smaller room near the laundry." I didn't blink. I simply reached forward and opened the folder. Inside was a printed floor plan of my home. The bedroom where I had slept with my husband for 30 years had Sarah and David scribbled across it in red ink. My name was shoved into a tiny back room. "A care plan?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously steady. "It's a win-win," Sarah insisted, regaining her arrogant posture. "You don't have to worry about the upkeep. Brenda gets a nice place, and we get the space we deserve." They had been planning to hijack my home under the guise of elder care. I closed the folder and slid it back toward her. "I am 65, Sarah, not 90. My health is perfect. I hire a landscaper for the upkeep, and I certainly don't need Brenda keeping an eye on me in my own house. If you're going to be this stubborn, you're going to end up entirely alone." Sarah snapped, the fake sweetness vanishing. "Don't expect us to come around if you treat us like strangers. I manage my house perfectly well." I stood up, opening the front door. "Have a safe drive home." Sarah scoffed, grabbed her folder, and stormed out. David mumbled an apology to the floor and followed her. As the door clicked shut, I realized my space was no longer safe. Sarah had a spare key. I didn't wait for them to act on their threats. That afternoon, I walked down to my basement. For the past 2 years, Sarah had slowly turned it into a free storage unit. There were boxes of David's old college gear, seasonal decorations they didn't have room for, and 2 heavy antique armchairs that belonged to Brenda. I had allowed the slow invasion under the excuse of helping family. No more. I picked up my phone and hired a local moving company. 2 strong men arrived within the hour. I directed them to the basement, pointing out exactly what didn't belong to me. "Take all of these boxes and those 2 chairs. The delivery address is 20 minutes away." I paid them in cash and watched the truck pull out of my driveway. I didn't feel angry. I felt incredibly light. Pushing back didn't require screaming matches or tears. It just required decisive action. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with a notification from the smart doorbell camera I had installed last year. It showed the movers carefully stacking 14 heavy boxes and 2 antique chairs directly on Sarah's front porch, completely blocking her front door. My phone immediately started ringing. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I answered on the fourth ring. "Hello. What is the meaning of this?" She screeched so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "There is a mountain of junk blocking my door. Brenda's antique chairs are sitting on my lawn. It's not junk. It's your property," I answered smoothly. "I decided to clear out my basement. Since you mentioned needing more space for your lifestyle, I thought you should have all your things back. I don't have room for this. You can't just dump this here without asking. Just like you can't plan to move your mother-in-law into my house without asking," I replied. "Good luck organizing." I ended the call and blocked her number for the next 24 hours. Tomorrow, I had an appointment to keep. The next morning, I drank my coffee while watching a specialized technician work on my front door. I wasn't just changing the cylinders. I was upgrading the entire system. By 10:00 a.m., my front door, back door, and garage access were fitted with smart locks. They only opened with my fingerprint or a specific code generated from my phone. Physical keys were now entirely obsolete. I tipped the technician generously and waved him off. Just after lunch, the system was put to the test. I was in the backyard pruning my hydrangeas when my phone buzzed with an alert. I tapped the screen and opened the live video feed from the front porch. Sarah was standing there holding a large plastic bin filled with winter coats. She reached into her purse and pulled out her old brass house key. I watched as she aggressively pushed the key toward the door, only to freeze. She stared at the sleek black digital panel where the keyhole used to be. She tapped the screen. It beeped, asking for a code. She typed in her birthday. Error. She typed in my birthday. Error. Visibly irritated, she balled her hand into a fist and banged on the wooden door frame. "Mom, open the door. I know you're in there." I took off my gardening gloves, walked through the house, and opened the door just a few inches, leaving the heavy internal security chain engaged. "Hello, Sarah. Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. She flinched, almost dropping the bin. "Mom, what is this thing? I came to put my winter clothes in the attic. My closets are completely full because of all the boxes you dumped on me yesterday." I upgraded the security system, I said. "And my attic is no longer available for storage. I need the space for my own things." She glared at me, realizing the physical access to her childhood home was permanently revoked. "You're locking me out." "Your own daughter." "I'm securing my property," I corrected. "Have a good afternoon." "Wait." Sarah jammed her foot into the small gap before I could shut the door. "You can't just cut us off like this. David is stressed. I'm stressed. And Brenda had to cancel her country club membership today because of you." I looked down at her designer shoes blocking my door. "Remove your foot, Sarah, or I will close the door on it." She hesitated, then pulled her foot back, realizing I wasn't playing a game. "You are being completely unreasonable." A new voice chimed in. Brenda stepped out from the passenger side of Sarah's parked car and marched up the driveway. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You are destroying this family over a few dollars. Sarah is your flesh and blood, and David is yours," I replied, looking Brenda right in the eyes. "If you are so concerned about their financial well-being, you are more than welcome to hand over your credit cards. I've done my part." "That's different." Brenda sputtered, her face turning a deep shade of red. "They are young. They need support to build their lives. They are 35, Brenda. If they haven't built it by now, using my retirement fund to buy designer handbags isn't going to fix it." I shifted my gaze back to my daughter. I love you, Sarah. But I will no longer fund a lifestyle you cannot afford, nor will I be bullied in my own home. When you are ready to have a relationship that doesn't involve my wallet, give me a call. Before either of them could launch into another guilt trip, I shut the heavy oak door. The smart lock engaged instantly with a satisfying mechanical click. I stood in the hallway and watched the camera feed. Brenda was throwing her hands in the air, complaining loudly, while Sarah kicked my welcome mat. They eventually dragged the bin of winter clothes back to the car and sped off. The physical boundaries were set, but I knew people like Brenda wouldn't surrender their comfort without trying one last social maneuver. Saturday morning was my time. I always walked to the local farmer's market to buy fresh tomatoes and my favorite artisan cheese. The weather was crisp, but my peaceful routine evaporated when I approached the dairy stand. Brenda was standing there, flanked by 3 women from our neighborhood book club. She wasn't buying anything. She was waiting for me. She had deliberately brought an audience. Anita, darling. Brenda called out, raising her voice much louder than necessary to ensure everyone in a 20-foot radius could hear. I was just telling the ladies how terribly worried we are about you. Sarah is heartbroken. Cutting off your only daughter just to be vindictive. It's not healthy, dear. The 3 women exchanged uncomfortable glances, pretending to inspect jars of local honey, but their ears were completely tuned in. Brenda expected me to shrink in embarrassment or get defensive in front of our peers. I did neither. I finished counting my cash, handed it to the vendor, and placed my cheese into my canvas tote bag before turning to face her. I haven't cut my daughter off, Brenda, I said, keeping my voice at a normal conversational volume but speaking with crystal clarity. I simply stopped paying the bills for 2 35-year-old adults. Brenda puffed up her chest. You changed the locks on her. You took her off the insurance. I did. I nodded, simply. Because a mother's job is to raise independent adults, not to serve as a limitless ATM for her daughter and her mother-in-law. I'm sure you understand, Brenda, since it was you who taught us all how to go luxury shopping without bringing a wallet last week. One of the book club women suddenly coughed, hiding a smirk behind her hand. Brenda's confident posture shattered. Her face flushed a violent crimson as she desperately tried to control the narrative. That was an honest mistake. Of course it was. I smiled politely. Enjoy the market, ladies. I walked away, leaving Brenda stumbling for words. Stripping away the drama with simple facts was all it took to protect my peace. 3 weeks passed in absolute tranquility. I spent my days reading, gardening, and enjoying the fact that my home remained exactly as I left it. No mystery boxes, no demanding visitors. Then I received a standard notification in my email. It was an alert from a bank I rarely used. When Sarah went to college 15 years ago, I opened a joint checking account to transfer her grocery money. I hadn't used it in a decade, but there was still a modest emergency buffer of about $4,000 sitting in it, entirely my money. The alert read, "Insufficient funds for attempted transfer." I logged into the portal immediately. Someone had attempted to wire $4,500 from the joint account to a luxury car dealership for a down payment. The transaction was blocked only because it exceeded the available balance by $500. Sarah was trying to drain the forgotten account to maintain her image. I didn't call her. I didn't send a warning text. I simply clicked transfer funds. I moved the entire $4,000 balance directly into my private single-owner account at my primary bank. Next, I initiated the paperwork to close the joint account completely. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was David. I answered cautiously. "Anita." David sounded completely defeated. Sarah tried to use the old college account to put a down payment on a new lease. The dealership just told us the account is empty and closed. The financing fell through. That money was an emergency fund from 15 years ago, David, I said, evenly. A luxury car lease is not an emergency. It's a liability. I know, he sighed deeply. I told her not to do it. We're drowning in debt, Anita. Brenda is furious we can't pay her club fees, and Sarah is too proud to admit we're broke. That is a difficult reality to face, I replied, offering no financial life raft. But you have to face it yourselves. I get it, he murmured. I really do. The cord was officially cut. It has been 6 months since the day I walked out of that high-end boutique. The fallout was exactly what I expected, but the peace that followed was better than I could have imagined. Sarah and David couldn't keep up the charade. Without my emergency card, my insurance coverage, and my phone plan, the math simply didn't work. They had to sell one of the luxury SUVs and downsize to a smaller apartment. Brenda, completely out of options and unwilling to spend her own savings to help her son, stop talking to all of us entirely. Sarah didn't speak to me for 4 months. She posted vague complaints on social media about toxic families and selfish parents. But I never engaged. I muted her posts and went on with my life. My peace didn't depend on the approval of people who viewed me merely as a resource. Last week, David came by alone. He brought a bag of fresh coffee beans and sat at my kitchen counter. He looked tired, but grounded. He told me he was finally learning to budget and that Sarah had reluctantly taken a part-time job to help cover their debts. I didn't offer them a dime, and to my surprise, he didn't ask for one. As for me, my home is exactly the sanctuary it was always meant to be. Nobody leaves invasive boxes in my basement, and nobody draws up plans to steal my bedroom. I enjoy my mornings pruning the hydrangeas and my evenings reading in absolute silence. I learned that boundaries aren't walls built out of anger. They are simply doors with secure locks. You don't need grand legal battles or screaming arguments to take back your life. Sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself and for them is letting people face the actual cost of their own decisions. I secured my door, protected my resources, and reclaimed my peace. And I hold the only key.